What if I told you that behind the image of England's most powerful queen lived a woman who carried secrets she never wanted the world to smell, see, or even imagine? History remembers Queen Elizabeth I as the glittering Virgin Queen, confident, commanding, flawless. But the truth hiding beneath the silks and jewels was far uglier, far more human, and sometimes shockingly disgusting. Because while Elizabeth ruled an empire, her private life was ruled by rituals that would make anyone today feel sick. And once you discover what she actually did to maintain her beauty, her power, and her carefully crafted royal image, you may never look at her portraits the same way again. Elizabeth didn't just hide her emotions. She hid her body, every inch of it, and the lengths she went to, just to keep up appearances, were so extreme that her closest ladies admitted they were frightened of what they saw when the Queen was undressed. Not because of illness, not because of age, but because of the bizarre habits she followed, habits so dangerous and unhygienic that they nearly killed her more than once. These were not royal luxuries. These were royal nightmares. And her story proves something chilling. Sometimes the brightest crown hides the darkest truth. The first shocking part of Elizabeth's daily life was the thick, heavy makeup she refused to live without. At a distance, her pale face looked smooth, perfect, almost glowing. Exactly the image she wanted the world to see. But the truth behind that pale glow was poisonous. Elizabeth didn't know it, but every morning she was painting her face with something deadly, a white paste made from vinegar and lead. Yes, lead. The same toxic metal that can rot flesh, cause hair to fall out, and slowly damage the brain. She used it every day for decades. Imagine it. Layer after layer of thick, chalky paint pressed into her skin until it hardened like a mask. And she never washed it off properly. Over time, her skin turned rough, cracked, and painful. But instead of stopping, she simply covered the damage with more makeup. And then, even more. Her face became trapped under a stiff, poisonous shell, and the softness of her real skin was lost forever. Her ladies said that removing it took hours of scraping, rubbing, and soaking, so painful that sometimes the Queen screamed. To survive it, she kept adding more layers, pretending everything was fine. But the truth was written right on her face, even if no one was allowed to see it. And then came the part that shocked even the people who loved her. The Queen almost never bathed. In fact, she believed that frequent bathing was dangerous. She said that water could weaken the body, open the pores, and invite sickness. So she avoided it. For long stretches of time, months, sometimes even longer. She once boasted that she only bathed when necessary. But for her, necessary didn't mean every week or even every month. It meant whenever she felt like it, which was extremely rare. Her body was kept wrapped in layers of gowns and corsets, trapping sweat and dirt beneath cloth that was never fully cleaned. Imagine the smell of heavy fabric worn every day under hot lights, during long meetings, through stress and fear. Her ladies powdered her skin to hide the odor. They perfumed her dresses to mask it. They burned herbs in her rooms so guests would never guess the truth. And while courtiers praised her elegance, they never knew that under the glittering gowns was a queen who almost never washed her body. But even worse was what she did to her teeth. Elizabeth loved sweets, especially the finest sugar from across the world. It was a luxury only the rich could afford, and she enjoyed it constantly. Candied fruits, sweetened almonds, honeyed pastries. She ate them all without hesitation. But in the 1500s, no one understood the dangers of sugar, and Elizabeth became the perfect example of what it could do. Her teeth slowly turned black. Many fell out. Some rotted so badly that she couldn't chew properly, and her doctors had to soften her food before she ate it. But here's the bizarre part. Instead of hiding it, black teeth became fashionable among the English nobility, simply because their queen had them. People painted their own teeth dark to look wealthier. Meanwhile, Elizabeth suffered quietly. Pain, infection, and sometimes swelling so bad she couldn't speak. One of her bishops said he refused to preach in front of her because her mouth hurt too much for her to smile or talk for long. Yet she still forced herself to appear proud, composed, and confident, even while every word must have brought a stab of pain. And then there was her obsession with wigs. Most people think Elizabeth wore wigs to express style, but the real reason was far more troubling. The poisonous lead in her makeup destroyed her natural hair. It made it brittle. It made it fall out in clumps. Soon the queen was almost completely bald. But she couldn't let the world know. A queen with no hair would seem weak, aging, vulnerable. So she collected dozens of wigs, bright red, golden, curled, towering designs that hid the truth under a fantasy image. But these wigs were not clean. They were often reused, not properly washed, and made from hair that came from anywhere. Sometimes from the poor, sometimes from the dead. Stored away in warm, dusty rooms, they attracted lice, dirt, and oil. Her ladies said that cleaning them was almost impossible without ruining them. And then there was her obsession with wigs. Most people think Elizabeth wore wigs to express style, but the real reason was far more troubling. The poisonous lead in her makeup destroyed her natural hair. It made it brittle. It made it fall out in clumps. Soon the queen was almost completely bald. But she couldn't let the world know. A queen with no hair would seem weak, aging, vulnerable. So she collected dozens of wigs, bright red, golden, curled, towering designs that hid the truth under a fantasy image. But these wigs were not clean. They were often reused, not properly washed, and made from hair that came from anywhere. Sometimes from the poor, sometimes from the dead. Stored away in warm, dusty rooms, they attracted lice, dirt, and oil. Her ladies said that cleaning them was almost impossible without ruining them. So many days the queen placed one of those wigs directly onto her head, pressing it against her irritated scalp, trapping heat and sweat beneath it. And she wore it for hours. If she felt pain, she never showed it. Her wigs became her armor. But they also became one of the dirtiest parts of her royal image. But none of this compares to the final, most disturbing habit she kept hidden until the very end. In her last years, Elizabeth developed a terrifying refusal to remove her makeup, her clothes, or even lie down. She believed that if she undressed or rested in a bed, she would die. So she stayed upright for days and nights, pacing, sitting in fear, trembling under the weight of her own thoughts. Her ladies begged her to sleep. She refused. They begged her to wash. She refused. They begged her to change her gown. She refused. And as her body weakened, her clothes clung to her, dirty, sweaty, and increasingly foul-smelling. Her ladies said the smell became overwhelming. Her skin broke under the fabric. Her body shook with exhaustion. But her fear was stronger than her pain. She was a queen trapped inside her own rituals, her own anxieties, her own body that she no longer trusted. And by the end, those who cared for her said something that still haunts historians today. The queen who once dazzled Europe died dressed in filth, hiding the very human truth she had spent her entire life trying to escape. People today worship her as a powerful symbol of leadership. But the truth is more complex. Elizabeth wasn't just a mighty ruler. She was a woman fighting battles that happened long before war or politics, battles with her body, her fears, her vanity, and the impossible expectations placed on her. She lived in a world without science, without medicine, without understanding, and she paid the price. Every royal painting shows her glowing, but behind that glow was a secret layer of poison, pain, and suffering. Her story reminds us that history's greatest icons were not perfect. They were human. And sometimes the most glamorous lives hide the darkest realities. But the strange thing is this. The people around her never questioned any of it. No one dared ask why the queen's face was cracking beneath layers of white paint. No one dared to mention the smell hidden under her gowns. No one whispered a word about her teeth, or her fear of water, or the cloud of perfumes that followed her everywhere. They simply obeyed, quietly cleaning her chambers, preparing her cosmetics, brushing her wigs, and pretending these habits were perfectly normal. Because in her world, power meant silence, and silence meant survival. Still, you have to imagine the women who worked closest to her, the ladies who stood only inches away while she was dressed each morning. They saw everything the world never knew. They were the ones who scraped the hardened paint from her face until her skin bled. They were the ones who washed the linens stained with sweat and fear. They were the ones who brushed out the wigs that carried lice, dust, and the faint smell of old hair. And they were the ones who had to pretend that none of it bothered them. None of it was strange. None of it was dangerous. Because their queen demanded perfection, even if it meant destroying herself to keep up the image. And behind all these disturbing habits was one truth Elizabeth never said out loud, but lived every day. She was terrified of aging. Her entire identity as the Virgin Queen depended on her appearance, her image of purity, youth, and immortality. Every crack in her skin, every rotten tooth, every thinning spot on her scalp reminded her of something she refused to accept. That time was catching her. That the girl who once danced with princes and dazzled ambassadors was slipping away. And so she fought back the only way she knew how, by hiding her real body and painting a false one on top of it. Her makeup wasn't just makeup. It was protection. Her wigs weren't just style, they were shields. Her refusal to bathe wasn't stubbornness. It was fear that her fragile skin would fall apart if touched too harshly. Her blackened teeth weren't just a consequence of sugar. They were a symbol of the price she paid to look powerful. And the saddest part? The world believed the illusion. They saw her sharp mind, her golden gowns, her fiery speeches, her endless strength. But they never saw the woman behind it all, exhausted, frightened, and trapped inside a body she could no longer control. She wasn't just fighting Spain, or rebellions, or court conspiracies. She was fighting her own reflection every day. As the years passed, the pressure became unbearable. Her rituals grew more extreme. She spent longer hours in front of her mirrors, touching her face softly, as if afraid it might crumble under her fingers. She asked her ladies to keep the room dim so no one could see her skin clearly. She demanded thicker makeup, tighter gowns, bigger wigs, more layers to bury the truth. And her ladies obeyed, even when they saw her health worsening. Even when her moods changed from calm to furious in minutes. Even when she seemed lost in her own thoughts, as though her mind was slipping into the shadows created by the poison she wore every day. And then came the final months. The months no historian likes to describe in detail, because they reveal just how human she truly was. She stopped eating properly. She grew thin, frail, and restless. Nights became torture because she believed lying down meant surrendering to death. So she paced and paced, whispering to herself, refusing sleep, refusing comfort. Her body weakened until she could barely stand, but she still refused to remove her gown. It clung to her with dirt, sweat, and tears, but she treated it like armor. And if anyone tried to help her undress or bathe, she turned away with the same stubbornness that once terrified kings. She sat on the floor for hours, legs crossed, her back hunched, her eyes red from sleeplessness. Her ladies begged her to rest. She only shook her head. She knew the end was coming, but she refused to let anyone see her vulnerability, not even in her final breaths. When she finally could no longer speak, people whispered that it looked like the queen was fading inside a shell she had spent a lifetime building. Her body had grown too weak to hold up the image she had worn for so long. And when she died, the silence in the court was not just mourning, it was shock. Because the woman they had watched rule for 45 years, the untouchable symbol of power, had left behind a body covered in the marks of fear, vanity, and the crushing demands of royalty. The truth is that Elizabeth's life was not glamorous. It was not clean. It was not perfect. It was a constant performance, a role she had to play every waking moment. But behind the jewels, behind the portraits, behind the speeches, she was just a woman trying desperately to control the one thing she never could, the body she lived in. And that's why her story still fascinates us today. Not because she was flawless, but because she wasn't. She was messy, complex, brilliant, insecure, powerful, and painfully human. She ruled a nation, but she couldn't rule her own fears. And the hygiene practices she followed, strange, dangerous, disgusting, were not signs of madness. They were signs of a woman doing everything she could to survive in a world where a queen had to be perfect, even if it meant destroying herself to appear that way. So the next time you see her shimmering in a golden portrait, remember this. The real Queen Elizabeth I was nothing like the image she left behind. She was stronger, darker, more complicated, and far more tragic. And sometimes, the most powerful queens are the ones hiding the deepest scars.